Hey, what's up? If you're watching this video, I would wager to bet you're having an issue with your ice maker somehow. So hopefully this video can help you out. I recently had this problem, so let's take a listen as to what I was encountering. I just flipped it to crushed ice and we've got no ice coming out. I can hear it turning in there, but we've got nothing. So let's take a look, open the door up and see what's going on. We've got a chute there that's full of ice. The ice tray itself is definitely full. And this stuff right here is all loose. So that's telling me that that ice was just dropped down from the tray into the chute. It's all loose, as if it were going to go into your cup. But if you take off this loose stuff, we've got a solid jam under there. In other words, the ice has been compacted, melted, frozen together. So the first thing we're going to do is get all this stuff out, right? So I'm just going to take a knife and just carefully kind of scrape the edges, and that should loosen up the entire block of ice. So we will get rid of this thing. Here we go. Yeah, so we've got an issue. The ice is not dropping down from the chute. So there's a problem at the top of the chute somewhere here where it comes out. Let's take a look here. Let's put that camera right up there. You can see a little white plastic flap. Can you see that? It's got a little rubber gasket on the end. I know it's a little hard to see, but if I open that with my finger, we've got stuff coming out. So I would wager to bet that, yep, the little trap here, something is not happening as it should. And my bet is that that little flap door isn't opening as it should. So we're going to take this apart and we're going to check it out and see what is going on. One more time though, just for good measure. Yep, there's all that fresh ice right out of the tray that's dropping down, so there's something preventing it from going in through this little trap door here. Alright, so first things first, we're going to be taking off the control panel. Now keep in mind, your refrigerator may be very different from mine, and also keep in mind, I am not a professional at all. I'm just documenting what I did to fix my situation. So take what you see here and apply it to your specific context. It may or may not work, but here is what I ended up doing. So I'm going to pop off this little control panel here. You can see there's two little tabs, and just be really careful, obviously, if you feel it bending too much. You're going to want to back off of it. But those tabs do pop out just like that, and you can see all the wiring and whatnot exposed. Now, obviously, before you go and play around with this stuff and start touching this, you're going to want to cut the power to your refrigerator. But before we do that, let's just shine the light back here. You can see, whoa, we've got a rusted solenoid assembly, and essentially this part is responsible for letting water go into your ice tray. I'll put a link in the description below if you'd like to replace this item or learn more about it. So let's continue here. We're going to go down the circuit breaker and we're going to cut the power to the fridge. Make sure that light is off, and of course, very important step before you continue. Make sure that power is indeed off. Alright, next we're going to be taking out this little panel. There are 4 screws, and this plastic part just kind of pops out. Now before you do this, you have the option of taking off the wires, of course. I'm just going to show you kind of how this works, and it'll be connected. It'll be one connected piece until you disconnect those wire harnesses. But let's just slide that out and see here. You can see my theory is indeed correct. We have a problem with the flap. You can see there's a little gap there, not closing, which I would guess doesn't open very well either. So the next step, what I'm going to do is take off the harness here and disconnect the electrical. Obviously this is bare electrical components, so you want to make sure your hands are dry. You just may have been playing around with ice or water, right? So we're just going to slide these little harnesses off. Note how those little safety little plastic tabs slide up or pop up, and then they just slide off. Okay, so you should have 3 harnesses that are kind of dangling. Excuse me, 2 that are dangling here, and 1 that just left that other plastic little panel. Okay, so this is what it looks like with the control panel and that little other plastic insert removed with the electrical removed, okay? And you can see it's a pretty hot mess back here. We've got mold, we've got nasty buildup, we've got rusted parts. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to take this little flap off. I'm pressing on that. You can see it's not closing, and again, I think that's a problem. So something's snagging, something's holding up. So what I'm essentially going to do here, all I see is rubber and plastic and some metal pieces, right? So I'm going to just make some efforts here to clean this thing up. So in order to do that, I'm going to take all these little parts out of here. And the first part I'm going to take off is this little this plastic horizontal white thing. There's two little metal clips there you can see I'm removing. Obviously you can rewind if you need to see what I did there. All right. So with those little metal pins out, we should be able to now look right there. There's a spring. Take note about how that spring is right now, because if you take it out, that spring's going to fall off and you're going to have to remember how to put that back. Okay, so we're just going to pop this little white piece off, and that is, of course, is connected to the little flap. Okay, so make sure all those parts are carefully set aside, right? And just look how filthy this thing is. Actually, the backside's not too bad, but that thing is pretty dirty. Next up, we're going to remove the solenoid assembly piece, and there are 3 screws, one right here, and you can see it's all rusted and corroded, but with a little wiggling of my screwdriver, I should be able to get a good grip here. Be careful, you do not want to strip that out. Make sure your screwdriver is the right size. I don't necessarily recommend using this, a drill, because you might scratch the sides of your fridge. However, I'm going to do that and be, of course, really careful. So with that top screw removed, I'll set that aside carefully, and then there are 2 bottom screws below the solenoid assembly. These are less corroded in my particular case, but I'm going to take those out. Still pretty bad. And with those 2 screws there removed, you can take out your solenoid assembly. And we'll set that aside for now. You might want to put a drop cloth down so it doesn't scratch anything if you're working on top of your stove. I'm not going to take my own advice there. All right. So we've got that removed. In fact, everything that can be removed is now removed. And so from this point, it is a cleanup job. Let's put the camera down the chute or up the chute here just so you can appreciate the anatomy a little bit more there. All right, so I've got some cleaner. In my particular case, I'm just using some general bathroom cleaner, something that will help get away the lime buildup. Now you're going to want to read up on if this cleaner is, or type of cleaner is safe for your kitchen parts. I went ahead and took the risk, thinking that, we've got lime, we've got rust, so what better chemical or treatment to use? This is the exact kind of stuff that you would see in a bathroom, right, with water. Now, note on this particular piece, you do have electrical, you've got a circuit board and you've got wiring, so just be really careful anytime you spray around this. You might want to cover it up or wrap it up with a towel or something and protect that. If you're working with spray and you've got, water in the area, you get that wet and it's game over. So be really careful. So now that I've got all my parts that I'm going to be cleaning sprayed down, I'm going to let them soak for a while, especially that solenoid. You can see it there. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to take a sponge and a paper towel, and I'm just going to be wiping things down. Now I'm doing this with one hand here, so I'll have to put the camera down, so I'm just kind of simulating for you what I'm going to be doing. I'm also going to wear a glove because I don't want or gloves because I don't want this stuff in contact with my hand too much. So this is kind of what I'm doing. I'm going to alternate between that yellow spongy soft side and the green kind of more aggressive side. And I'm going to work it in these little parts here. You can see there's a lot of black grime and buildup and whatnot. And I'm just going to try to get all that stuff off as much as I can anyway. I understand it likely doesn't have to be a perfect job, but since it's here, I might as well give it my best effort and spend an extra couple of minutes. All right, let me get a better view here for you. So this is just a top-down view into the sink of me scrubbing more of these plastic pieces, and you can see from the sponge here, I've got some black mold and mildew that's kind of coming off. So I'm also going to take really good care and clean around, again, that electric board. Be really careful with that and get some of that dust off. Now you do have the option of, this is the little plastic piece that you put your cup against. There's a spring in there if you wanted to take that piece off. I'm not going to. I feel like I can access all those parts and get everything clean without having to remove that. So I'm also going to take a moment and clean up my screws. You can see those are heavily corroded and rusted. Actually, that's just buildup. They're actually in pretty good shape, but I do need to scrub those down pretty well. You can obviously replace them at this point if you have matching screws. All right, so let me angle the camera a little bit for you. I'm just cleaning the solenoid assembly now using that aggressive side of the brush there, or the sponge. If you have a wire brush, you might want to consider that. This stuff's pretty nasty. I'm making several passes here, and it's knocking most of it down and off. Alright, so I'm just going to continue that, getting that stuff all, and I'm going to take out this little middle piece that's inside the solenoid. Not sure the name of it, but I'm going to be scrubbing that down too. And anything else. So look at all this grime and rust that has come off of that. Alright, so with my parts relatively clean, I'm going to take my special spray here and give it a good dousing and just let it sit for a couple of minutes and let it do its thing. By the way, you might want to take a piece of tape and move your electrical components aside so you don't get those wet, obviously. Alright, now this stuff cleans up pretty well. It's on plastic, so there aren't a lot of sharp contours and corners and whatnot. You can see it's coming up pretty easily without too much scrubbing. So I'm going to spend several minutes here and be wiping and scrubbing all this down. Now all this nasty rust corrosion comes off pretty easily as well. Might give it another soaking or another spray, and then I'll alternate with the green and the yellow side depending on how stubborn that buildup is. Alright, so I'm getting there. Not quite happy with it, but I'm going to keep going here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to be emptying this. Obviously, that'll fill up with water or cleaner, and down here as well. And to empty this little part, little trick here, you can just grab your dry sponge, let it soak up all that cleaner, and then squeeze it out really well. And a few passes will empty that out for you. Alright, and I'm also going to wipe this down and clean it while I'm at it, right? Might as well. Now this next step might be a little unorthodox, but I'm going to take an air pump and I'm just going to blow out and essentially dry off all these parts before I put it all back together again in order to minimize unnecessary rusting or mildew. Obviously, if you have a hair dryer or something similar, you could do that. I'm just going to blow cold air on it using my pump here. And this is the cleaned result. I'm pretty happy with it. We didn't get all that rust, but again, we got all that mildew and black nasty stuff up. Now we're going to put the solenoid assembly back together. And I'm going to put a little bit of white grease. I will put a link in the description below for a similar grease if you're interested in that, but that essentially is going to lube up those parts and hopefully prevent some of the corrosion and rust from building up. Now I might have to do this. I don't know if this is a defect of the solenoid or what's going on here. I might have to replace it at some point. I have no idea. I will cross that bridge when I get there, but for now I'm going to clean this up and hopefully I don't have to do it again for another year or more. This fridge is about 5 years old, and you know, so that might be a natural thing. I'm not sure. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get the solenoid put back together. Obviously, we reversed the process of how we took it all apart. So we've got 3 screws, and we'll make sure those are greased up as well and put back in. Next, we'll take the little flap that you can see here, and this is probably a little tricky, or one of the most tricky parts of this, making sure that little spring is back in. It's not too bad, but we're going to take the spring. Sorry, it's a little out of focus here for you. I'm working with one hand. We're going to take that spring and slide it on to that little round plastic piece, and then your spring will seat. There's a little hole in the plastic you can see right there, and we'll just seat the spring into that little hole. And with one hand here, let's see if I can do this with one hand. We're going to slide that little arm, plastic arm, through the solenoid. Okay, look to the right of the screen. I'm going to put that little white bar into its little, there's 2 brackets. Okay, there's 1, there's 2, and then I'm going to pinch that little spring down, and you should wiggle the flap to make sure that that tension on the spring has indeed worked, and it is where it should be. We'll put these 2 little metal pins back in. Note the position of these. They pretty much only go one way. They're kind of little L-shaped things. There we go. And they seat nicely into the plastic little house there. And then we'll put the 2 screws back in. Get them started by hand. Now, if you used a drill to unscrew everything, be really careful. You don't want to over tighten any of these parts, so I recommend using a regular screwdriver to put all these back together. All right, with our solenoid and our flap installed, we can put this little plastic insert back. And to do so, you're going to want to kind of thread those wire harnesses back through how you had them before. So here's kind of what it looks like. We've got our wires poking through, and then you can see that control panel right there will pick up, and you might need to have somebody hold this for you, or you can kind of rig it into place, but I'm going to do this with one hand here. It is doable, no doubt about that, but just be careful, obviously things don't drop. With one wire harness back in, I can now secure this little plastic insert with my 4 screws, and then I can finish plugging in the rest of those harnesses. There you go. And then put that control panel back in. Now to put it back in, you're going to line up those little pins, the 2 that we took out from underneath earlier at the beginning of this video, and they should just click right in there. And there should be no play at all. It should be really tight. Here's a look underneath. We can see that flap now is indeed closed. Let's move it with our finger. It snaps closed really well. I like that tension. So it looks like the cleaning job worked. Let's test it out. We'll go down and turn the power back on. And before we test the ice maker, we're just going to run the water and make sure all that cleaner stuff has cleared the nozzle, because we just cleaned that, right? Water should be fine. We just don't want any remnants there. All right, so let's flip it to ice mode. Now you can see it spraying everywhere. That's a completely different issue, but we do have ice coming through now. There's the flap. It opens and closes automatically as it should, so problem solved. All right, that's it. Hopefully this video has been helpful in solving your specific problem. If it has, do me a favor and click that thumbs up button. For more do-it-yourself jobs and home product reviews, be sure to subscribe. Thank you so much.